Let's look at the NKBA graphic standards for interior elevations. What's an interior elevation? It is a vertical projection of a wall, and we use it in order to show different heights, materials, related information that can't be seen in other drawings. There's a lot of information, especially in kitchens and baths, that you just can't tell by looking at a plan, and so we draw these interior elevations. Your typical NKBA set will include an interior elevation for each and every wall that has pretty much anything installed on it: cabinetry, appliances, fixtures. You're also going to show each side of an island, and let me call your attention to this drawing right here. Here's an example. Notice we're seeing each side of the island. They are aligned, so they're like sitting on the same floor basically, and we don't show the walls or anything behind. This is not like a full elevation of what's behind it. It is just focused on the island, right? The only thing you might choose to do if, for example, you've got pendants over this island or anything hanging, you might include a ceiling line, just a line to indicate where that ceiling height is and show that pendant. That's useful because you can then dimension the height. So let's move back to kind of the more standard interior elevation of a full wall, and we have some examples of it here. Notice that again, if there's multiple drawings on the page, which often happens, you're going to align that floor level. This is a mistake I see all the time in student work. All right, so make sure that they're kind of sitting on the same ground. It makes all your dimensions line up, and it makes it way easier to understand and read these drawings. Another really common mistake I see is interior elevations typically do not show any thickness or structure. We don't see the thickness of the walls. We don't see the construction of the floor or the ceiling. All right, it is just a single line outline, kind of skimming the edges of the walls, the ceiling, and the floor. And that outline should be the heaviest line on the page. It is a very heavy line weight. It's just a border, it's just an outline. Now here's something that is specific to kitchen design that might not be familiar to you. And that is that sometimes we have elements that are perpendicular to the direction of the view. And an example would that be cabinetry on a side wall. And those elements we're going to draw in section. Chief Architect will automatically do this for you. It'll show the interior details of these cabinets in section. All right, I've just put a little yellow highlight on there so you can tell what I'm talking about. All right. Those working in AutoCAD or hand drafting, you can choose to use a heavy profile line. This would be a very heavy line that would just kind of indicate those items in section. This is also acceptable. Let's look at dimensions for the NKBA interior elevations. We were very definitive about what dimensions needed to be placed on a floor plan. The interior elevations, however, are a little more of a gray area, a little bit more of judgment is needed by the designer or the draftsperson. And so in general, you're going to have horizontal dimensions, right? Kind of in your left, right direction. And you're going to have vertical dimensions kind of in the up, down direction. Let's talk about the horizontal ones first. Your horizontal dimensions, you're going to kind of divide your elevation in half, and everything that's up here in the upper half of your elevation is going to get dimensioned above the elevation. And that's why I've drawn this big green arrow. All right, everything up there. Everything that's kind of in the bottom half gets dimensioned below. Again, you just get to make a judgment call about what those are. All right. So the horizontal dimensions do get three levels of dimensions, very similar to the floor plans, but it's a little bit more detailed. Here is where we finally dimension individual cabinetry pieces. Notice that, right? between the individual cabinet pieces. That is not shown in the floor plan. Right? We also include on that second line center lines to appliances and fixtures. Notice that just like on the floor plan, I suggest grabbing that dimension line and pulling it kind of to the center of the item that we're dimensioning it. You can see it right here as well. You can see it here. It is far easier to read. It's more clear than if your dimension just kind of stopped out here. We can tell what is dimensioned easier. Right? And your overall dimension is that third line. Notice if there's not enough information that you don't need those 1, 2, 3 lines, you just don't use it. So up here, we didn't have anything to center line, so we just left that one out. Here's another choice you can make. Notice we've got this 113 and 7/8 dimension up and down. In my opinion, that's kind of overkill. There's no real reason to have both of those. So you could leave one out if you like. Let's take a look at the vertical dimensions. Vertical. Again, there is a judgment call here. Anything that's kind of on the left-hand side of your interior elevation, you dimension over here. Anything that's kind of on the right, you dimension over here. Sometimes interior elevations will also have a line of vertical dimensions kind of in the middle. If it just wasn't clear enough, if you pulled them all the way out, some of the larger interior elevations will need a set of vertical dimensions in the middle. Right. And then what kind of interior dimensions let me try that again. And then what kind of vertical dimensions do you need? Again, it's a little bit up to the designer. Your intent is to clearly communicate all of these vertical elements. And so you need a lot of dimensions. Here's a couple of examples. On this dimension here, we've shown the toe kick and then the cabinet height. We've shown the countertop thickness. We've shown the dimension to the upper cabinets. And then because they extend all the way to the ceiling, we've got that. And then we've got an overall dimension. Looking over here to the right, notice for some reason they have left off that toe kick dimension. I think that's an error, and you probably need that information. Right? You've also missing a couple of important pieces of information that I really think should be in this set, and that is the heights, the installation heights of this vent hood. Right? Absolutely, that needs a dimension and it's missing. So you would go ahead and pull that one all the way out here. You might do a separate line of vertical dimensions for it. That's important. Thank you, everyone. In this video, we just took a look at the NKBA graphic standards for interior elevations.